The stray had been feeding for 3 nights, and Koneko Tujo could smell it before she could see it. She crouched at the lip of a drainage culvert on the industrial edge of Kuoh, small and still, her nostrils full of the copper reek of something that had stopped being a devil and started being a hunger. Behind her, Yuto Kiba stood with one hand resting easy on the hilt of a blade that wasn't there yet, waiting to be born the instant he willed it. The night was warm for autumn. The sodium lamps buzzed overhead, throwing long orange smears across wet concrete, and somewhere out past the shuttered warehouses, a train groaned along its rails and was gone. "It knows we're here," Koneko said. "It does," Kiba agreed. "It's deciding whether we're food or a fight." The stray answered the question for them. It came out of the dark between 2 loading bays in a wet rush of limbs, a thing that had once been a mid-tier devil and was now a swollen mass of overlapping mouths and grasping arms, its evil peace corrupted past any hope of the peerage that had abandoned it. It had killed the human that summoned it. It had killed the 2 exorcists sent to clean up after. It moved fast for something so large, and it moved straight at the smaller of the 2 intruders, because instinct told it the little one was the weak one. Instinct was wrong. Koneko caught the first arm and broke it across her forearm without changing expression, and Kiba was already moving, a demonic sword flickering into existence in his grip, when the sky did the thing that would end up in every faction's report before dawn. It was not lightning. Kiba would spend a long time trying to describe it and never manage. It was as if a seam had been there the whole time, invisible, and someone had simply undone it. A rip in the air above the warehouses that opened onto a churning nowhere, a gray-black knot place where colors that had no names slid over each other like oil on water. The dimensional gap. Kiba had heard it described exactly once, by a fallen angel who'd seen it and never wanted to again. The space between worlds, where the dragon of dragons was said to swim. Something fell out of it. The something hit the concrete of the loading yard hard enough to crack it in a neat radial star, landed in an ungraceful crouch, and stood up rubbing the back of a completely bald head. "Ow!" said the something. It was a man. A perfectly ordinary-looking man, average height, average build, wearing a yellow jumpsuit and a white cape, and an expression of profound, settled boredom. He looked up at the tear in the sky, which was already sealing itself back into nothing, and he squinted at it the way a person squints at a bus they've just missed. "Great," he said. "Now how am I supposed to get back?" The stray devil, which had noticed neither the tear nor the man's mood, chose that moment to lunge at the newcomer. Perhaps it smelled him, and read human and weak and food. Perhaps it simply lunged at anything that moved. It crossed the yard in a heartbeat, all its mouths open, a wall of corrupted flesh built to end a person. The man turned, mildly annoyed at the interruption, and hit it. Kiba did not see the punch. He was standing 40 meters away with a devil sword in his hand and centuries of Gremory clan combat instinct in his blood, and he did not see it. There was the man, and there was the stray, and then there was a sound like a mountain clearing its throat, a displacement of air that flattened the puddles across the whole yard and slapped both devils back a full step. And there was no more stray, not pieces of a stray, not a corpse, nothing. A fine red mist hung in the air where a monster had been, drifting down through the orange lamplight, and beyond it, punched clean through the wall of a warehouse and out the far side and out the wall of the next warehouse. A corridor of destruction ran off into the dark in a dead straight line, as if a god had drawn it with a ruler. The man lowered his fist. He looked at the mist. He looked mildly disappointed. "One punch," he sighed, "to no one. It's always one punch." Koneko's tail had gone rigid. Kiba realized his sword had dissolved from his hand, and he had not told it to. Every sense he had, the devil's senses that let him feel the weight of another being's power like heat off a stove, every one of them was screaming a single contradictory thing at him, over and over, and the thing they were screaming was nothing. The man in the yellow suit registered as a human. A tired, ordinary, unremarkable human. There was no aura on him at all, no demonic power, no holy pressure, no sacred gear signature, nothing. And he had just deleted a stray devil from existence, with the casual irritation of a man swatting a fly at dinner. "That's not possible," Kiba breathed. "Kiba." Koneko's voice was very small. We need to call Rias, now. Far away, in 3 different places at once, alarms of a kind that did not use sound were going off. Beneath the underworld, in a research annex that officially did not exist, an instrument built by Ajuka Beelzebub to monitor catastrophic power events spiked, held, and then, for a fraction of a second no clock could measure, reported a value it had no digits to display, and then reset itself as if embarrassed. A technician stared at it for a long time before deciding, out of pure self-preservation, that it had malfunctioned. Above a rain-lashed cathedral spire on the far side of the world, a young exorcist woman with blue-streaked hair paused with a wrapped bundle across her back, a bundle that hummed with holy light, and frowned at a sky that had, for just an instant, felt wrong in a direction she had no word for. And in a cluttered laboratory that smelled of ozone and instant noodles, a man with black hair and gold bangs and the lazy grin of someone who had been waiting a very long time to be surprised, looked up from a device gone haywire in his hands, and Azazel, governor of the Grigori, leader of the fallen angels, started to laugh. "Well now," he said to the empty room, "there's something new." Saitama, for his part, had a much simpler set of problems. He was lost. He was in what was clearly a city, and clearly not his city, judging by the signage and the layout and the general vibe of the place, and the hole he'd fallen through was gone, and he was pretty sure he'd missed the discount time frame at the supermarket back home, which had been the entire point of leaving the apartment in the first place. There'd been a sale, half off on everything with the yellow tags. He'd had a list. He looked down at the crater he'd made landing and felt a small, familiar pang of guilt. He always broke stuff. He tried not to. It just happened. "Sorry about your, ground," he said to the warehouse district in general. The 2 who'd been fighting the monster were still standing there, staring at him. A short, white-haired girl who looked like a middle schooler and a pretty blonde guy who looked like he belonged in a shampoo commercial. They were staring the way people always stared. That specific frozen look he'd gotten used to, the one people got right before they either ran away or started shouting about being disciples. If it helps to picture it, this whole thing you're watching was suggested by a viewer named Alhayanuaim, who dropped Saitama into the DxD world and dared the channel to make it work. So if you've got a universe and a character you want thrown together next, drop the pairing in the comments and hit subscribe, because that's exactly how stories like this one get picked. Saitama, of course, heard none of that. He was busy being lost. "Hey," he called over to the 2 staring kids, raising his voice a little. "Sorry to bug you. Is there a supermarket around here? Preferably one that's open. I'm kind of in a situation." The blonde guy's mouth opened and closed. "A supermarket," the guy repeated. "Yeah, groceries, food," Saitama mimed, unhelpfully, the act of picking something off a shelf. "There was a sale. Long story." The white-haired girl and the blonde guy exchanged a look that Saitama recognized. It was the, "Is this guy serious?" look. He got that one a lot too. He waited, patient, hands in the pockets of a jumpsuit that had, moments ago, been at the center of a localized apocalypse. Before either of them could answer, the air near the warehouses shimmered, a bloom of crimson light unfolding itself into a circle inscribed with a crest, and out of it stepped more people. A tall, striking young woman, with long crimson-red hair, and a bearing like she owned the ground she stood on. A dark-haired beauty with a ponytail and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A small blonde nun-looking girl clutching her hands together, and a brown-haired teenage boy in a school uniform who took one look at Saitama's crater, one look at the corridor of demolished warehouses, and went very pale. "Kiba, Koneko, report," the red-haired one said, and her voice had command in it. "The reading we got was—" She stopped. Her eyes had found Saitama. More precisely, her senses had found him, and reported, as everyone's did, a resounding and impossible nothing. Rias Gremory, heir to the Gremory clan, had felt the power spike from her clubroom 2 kilometers away, and had assumed, reasonably, that a god had entered Kuoh. She had come expecting a threat that might kill them all. She had found a bald man in a tracksuit asking about grocery stores. "Yo," said Saitama, lifting a hand in a small wave. "You guys know each other? Great. Any of you know where the food is?" Rias Gremory did not answer for several seconds. Her mind was working very fast and getting nowhere. The thing that had cratered the yard, punched a stray devil out of existence and drilled a tunnel through 2 industrial buildings, the thing her instruments had briefly registered as off the scale, was standing in front of her radiating the aura of a mildly hungry office worker. Every rule she understood about power said those 2 facts could not coexist. Power had weight. Power announced itself. You could not be that strong and feel like nothing, unless nothing was simply what it looked like when a thing was so far past the top of the scale that the scale gave up. The thought made the back of her neck cold. "Issei," she said quietly, without turning around. "Do not do anything. Do not say anything." "I wasn't gonna," Issei Hihodu hissed. "President, what is that? I can't feel him at all." "It's like there's a person-shaped hole in the world." "I know. Is he strong? He looks like a..." "Issei." Rias's voice was iron. "I have never felt anything I cannot feel. Do you understand? A being I can read tells me how much of it there is. A being I cannot read tells me there is more of it than I have the capacity to measure." She drew a slow breath. "Be polite." Saitama watched the huddle of teenagers, whisper arguing about him with the resigned air of a man who had been talked about in the third person by strangers many times before. He scratched his cheek. "Look," he said, and something in his flat, tired tone cut cleanly through their panic, because it was so completely without menace. "I'm gonna level with you, because you all seem freaked out and I don't want any trouble. I fell out of a hole in the sky about 2 minutes ago. I don't know where I am. That thing," he jerked a thumb at the drifting red mist, "jumped me, so I hit it. I didn't know it was your monster or whatever. My bad. I just want to find something to eat and figure out how to get home. That's it. That's the whole thing." He shrugged. "You can relax. I'm not gonna punch anybody who doesn't punch me first." There was a silence. It was the small blonde nun who broke it. Asia Argento took a hesitant step forward, past Rias's warning arm, her green eyes wide and, remarkably, not afraid. She had spent her life around beings of terrible power, and she had learned to read the thing under the power, and the thing under this one didn't feel like a monster at all. She said, in careful, accented Japanese. "You must be very hungry, if you fell so far." She twisted her fingers together. "We have food. At the clubroom. It's not a sale, but you're welcome to some, if you'd like." Saitama blinked at her. Then, for the first time since he'd fallen out of the sky, the boredom cracked, just a little, and the corner of his mouth twitched toward something that was almost a smile. "You know what," he said. "You're the first person to say a normal thing to me in this whole city. Yeah, food be great." "Thanks." Behind Asia, Rias Gremory closed her eyes for a moment and made a decision that would ripple outward through every faction of the supernatural world before the week was done. She could not fight this being. That much was obvious. And if she was wrong about that, the price of finding out was extinction. She could not ignore it. It had already carved a scar across her territory that the Grigori and the church and the underworld would all have felt. The only move on the board was the one nobody in devil politics ever trusted, because it was so rarely available. She could be kind to it and see what it wanted. "Yes," Rias said, opening her eyes, and when she looked at Saitama, she wore the warm, gracious smile of the Gremory air, the one that had put 100 nervous new peerage members at ease, even as her heart hammered. "Please, be our guest. I'm Rias Gremory. This is my club. And you are?" "Saitama," said Saitama. "Just Aishima?" "Yeah." He fell into step beside Asia as the group began, warily, to move. "It's easier that way, fewer syllables." Kiba fell in behind, keeping the man in his peripheral vision the entire way, one hand hovering near where a sword would come. Koneko did the same on the other flank, tail lashing. Neither of them relaxed for a second, and both of them understood, on the animal level below thought, that if the man in the yellow suit decided their vigilance was a problem, it would be exactly as much protection as the warehouse walls had been. Issei jogged to catch up to Rias. "President," he whispered, "are we seriously bringing him back to the clubroom? What if he's, I don't know, evil? What if he's like, the strongest evil thing ever?" Rias watched the bald man's back. Watched him say something to Asia that made the timid girl actually laugh. Watched him stop, halfway across the ruined yard, to carefully pick up a stray cat that had been startled by the noise and set it gently on a windowsill, out of the way of the broken glass. "Then we're already dead, Issei," she said softly, "and being kind to him is the only thing left that we get to choose." Overhead, the seam in the sky was gone, as if it had never been. But 3 factions had felt it open, and none of them were going to let it go. The Occult Research Club met in the old schoolhouse, a Victorian-styled building set apart from the rest of Kuoh Academy, its dark wood and tall windows lending it the air of a place where secrets were meant to be kept. By day, it was a curiosity the ordinary students avoided out of vague unease. By night, it was the seat of Rias Gremory's peerage, warded a dozen ways, invisible to the mundane world. Saitama walked in, looked around at the antique furniture and the heavy red drapes, and the ornate magic circle worked into the floorboards, and said, "Nice place. Kinda gloomy, though. You guys ever think about a lamp?" Nobody answered him. They were all still calibrating to his existence. He sat down on the offered couch, which creaked but held, and accepted the plate Asia brought him. Leftover curry, reheated, a stack of it, with the uncomplicated gratitude of a man whose entire emotional relationship with food was "is there food?" He ate. The peerage watched him eat the way one might watch a live grenade sit quietly on a table, with total, tense, unbroken attention. Akeno Himejima, the dark-haired beauty, leaned close to Rias by the window and murmured behind her hand, "President, I've been trying to read him since he walked in. Passively, actively. I even used the deep sense." Her voice, usually so honeyed and languid, had a thin wire of strain running through it. "There's nothing there. It's not that he's hiding it. It's not a concealment technique. I'd feel the edges of a concealment. It's a genuine absence. He reads exactly like a normal human man." She paused. "A normal human man who erased a stray devil with his fist. I know. That's not how it works." "I know, Akeno." Across the room, Saitama scraped the last of the curry off the plate and looked around hopefully. "Is there more, or—" "I'll make more," said Asia at once, and fled to the little kitchenette, glad of something to do with her hands. Issei sidled up to the couch, unable to contain himself any longer. He was a teenage boy who had recently become a devil and acquired a legendary dragon in his left arm, and the pull of a genuine mystery was more than his self-control could manage. He plopped down on the far end of the couch, keeping what he clearly imagined was a safe distance. "So," he said, "Saitama, right? That punch back there, that was— How did you— I've never seen anything move like that. Are you a god? Are you a dragon? Are you some kind of— I don't even know what's above a dragon." "Are you above a dragon?" Saitama considered the question with the seriousness of a man who genuinely didn't know what most of those words meant in this context. "I'm a guy," he said. "I do hero stuff. Back home." He set the empty plate down. "The punching thing isn't complicated. I just hit stuff. It works out." "It works out." Issei's voice climbed an octave. "You blew a hole through 2 buildings. Yeah, I'm still sorry about that. Partner, say nothing more to that man. Do not challenge him. Do not measure yourself against him." "Why?" Issei thought back. "What is he?" A long, deep pause, like tectonic plates settling. The dragon's presence pressed close, wary. Issei went pale and shut his mouth. Drake did not get scared. Drake had once, according to legend, threatened to eat God. If Drake wanted him to be quiet, Issei was going to be quiet. The doors of the club room opened without a knock. The woman who entered was small and severe, with a neat black bob and rimless glasses and the crisp, buttoned-up presence of a person who had never in her life been late or unprepared. Behind her came a handful of others in Kuoh uniforms, arranged with the unconscious geometry of a unit that trained together. Sona Citri, student council president, heir to the Citri clan, and the other devil authority in Kuoh uniform, took in the room with a single sweeping glance. The peerage arrayed defensively, Rias's tension, the stranger on the couch. Her eyes settled on Saitama, and behind the glasses, they narrowed, because her senses were telling her the same impossible thing everyone else's were. "Rias," Sona said, in the flat, clipped tone of someone requesting an incident report. "There is a 200-meter trench through the warehouse district. There is a landing crater registering seismic on 3 of my instruments, and there is a power event in the record from 20 minutes ago that my equipment logged as an error, because the number it produced was not a number. She adjusted her glasses. I would like an explanation. I would like it to be a good one. Sona. Rias inclined her head. Meet Saitama. He fell out of the dimensional gap into the warehouse district, was attacked by a stray, and defended himself. A beat. You're looking at the source of your error. Sona Sitri turned her full analytical attention on the bald man in the yellow suit, who had, at that moment, discovered the club's snack cabinet across the room and was eyeing it with naked interest. Him, she said. Him. That man. Yes, Sona. Sona was quiet for a moment. Sona Sitri did not believe in things she could not measure. Her entire self was built on strategy, calculation, the careful weighing of forces on a board. It was, in fact, why she and Rias played chess together. Sona treated the world as a series of positions to be solved. And here was a piece she could not evaluate, a piece with no listed value, a piece that had walked onto the board and, by existing, informed her that her understanding of what pieces could be was incomplete. She hated it. She hated it the way she hated a proof with a hole in it. Test him, she said quietly. Rias's head snapped around. What? Not a fight, a reading. Sona was already moving, gesturing to one of her peerage, a slender young man who inclined his head and began, silently, to weave a spell between his fingers, a delicate lattice of gray light. Tsubaki isn't here, so Gen will do a measured analysis, a precise scan. If the crude senses fail, perhaps a fine instrument won't. I need a number, Rias. I cannot make a single good decision about this man without a number. She looked at the stranger. With his permission, of course. Saitama, who had caught the gist, shrugged from the couch. You want to scan me? Sure, knock yourself out. People do that sometimes. It never finds anything. He said it not as a boast, but as a plain, slightly weary fact, the way a man might tell a doctor his blood pressure was always normal. The Sitri peerage member, Gen, extended the lattice of gray light toward Saitama. It settled over him like a fine net, a diagnostic weave designed to map the flows of power in a target, to trace demonic and holy and draconic energies to their source, and put a value on them. It was precise and elegant, and the product of the Sitri clan's long specialization in water and analysis magic. It found nothing. Gen frowned and pushed more power into it. The lattice brightened. It probed deeper, sinking its threads toward whatever engine drove a being that could delete a devil with one blow. There was no engine. There was a man. The threads reached the place where the power should be, where, in any other being, they would find the roaring furnace of demonic energy, or the searing radiance of holy light, or the vast old fire of a dragon, and they found a man who was thinking about whether he was allowed to open the snack cabinet. That was all. Muscle and bone and a bald head and a mild appetite. The threads went looking for the source of the impossible strength, and simply ran out of man before they found it, as if the strength were not in him at all but were some brute fact about the universe that happened to be shaped like him. Gen made a small, strangled sound. Sweat had broken out on his forehead. President, he said, voice tight, I can't. There's no reservoir. There's no core. The output is real. The residual damage confirms an output that would take a Satan-class demonic engine, but there's no source. It's like, he struggled. It's like being asked to measure the horsepower of a car that has no engine, but is doing 300 kilometers an hour anyway. The question doesn't have an answer. The car just goes. He let the spell drop, breathing hard, and looked at Saitama with the specific horror of a scholar whose framework has just been disproven in front of him. Saitama gave him a thumbs up. Told you. Sona Sitri stood very still. Then, slowly, she took off her glasses, cleaned them with a cloth from her pocket, and put them back on. A ritual, Rias knew, that Sona performed when she needed a moment to keep her composure intact. Riasis, Sona said at length, I need to speak with you privately, now. The two heiresses withdrew to the far corner of the club room, and Sona pitched her voice low. Do you understand what we're looking at? I understand that I can't fight it, Rias said. Beyond that, no. It's worse than that. Sona's composure was, for once, visibly frayed at the edges. Rias, the three-faction piece, the entire piece, rests on balance. It works because everyone can measure everyone else. The devils know how strong the angels are. The angels know how strong Grigori is. Everyone knows where Great Red and Ophis sit at the top. Everyone knows the Longinus can kill a god. Everyone knows the shape of the board. Deterrence is the piece. Nobody starts a war they've calculated they'll lose. She gestured, tightly, at the man on the couch. And now there is a piece on the board that cannot be calculated, that no one can measure, no one can deter, no one can predict, and no one owns. Do you understand what that does to every calculation everyone has ever made? Rias felt the cold at the back of her neck deepen into something structural. It breaks it, she said. It breaks all of it. Sona's jaw was tight. The moment the factions realize what he is, and they will, they felt the gap open. The Grigori's sensors are 10 times finer than mine. Every single one of them is going to want the same 3 things, in this order. First, to recruit him. Second, if they can't recruit him, to control him. Third, if they can't control him, to make sure no rival faction gets him first, by any means available. She looked at Rias steadily. And he doesn't even know he's a piece on the board. He thinks he's a man looking for a supermarket. Across the room, Asia returned from the kitchenette with a fresh, heaping plate of curry, and Saitama's whole face lit up with a simple, genuine happiness that looked wildly out of place on the most dangerous being either heiress had ever encountered. He thanked her 3 times. He asked her name and repeated it back to make sure he had it right. He offered her the good spot on the couch. "He's decent," Rias said quietly, almost to herself, watching it. "That's the strangest part. All that power and he's—" He picked up a stray cat, Sona, on the way here. He moved broken glass so it wouldn't get cut. "I don't care if he's a saint." Sona's voice was flat. "A decent man with the power to end the world is still a man with the power to end the world, and every faction is about to come knocking to find out which way he leans. The question that matters isn't whether he's kind, Rias. It's what he wants, because whatever he decides he wants, no force in existence can tell him no." She turned to go, gathering her peerage with a glance. "Watch him. Keep him comfortable. Keep him here, if you can, and away from anyone who might frighten him or provoke him, because I would genuinely rather not learn what a frightened one of those looks like." At the door she paused. "And Rias, report this to your brother, tonight. Sergex needs to know before someone else tells him. If the Grigori get to Sergex first with their version of events, we lose control of the narrative before it starts." She left. Her peerage filed out after her, and the young man Jen cast one last shaken, disbelieving look back at the bald man on the couch, as if hoping he might have become measurable in the last 30 seconds. He hadn't. The clubroom door clicked shut. In the quiet that followed, Saitama finished his second plate, set it down, and let out a long, contented breath. He looked around at the peerage, at Rias trying to project calm, at Akeno's fixed watchful smile, at Kiba and Koneko still braced at the room's edges, at Issei staring at him with undisguised awe, and Aisha beaming beside him. "So," Saitama said, "that short lady with the glasses, she seemed stressed. Was that about me?" "A little," Rias admitted. "Figured." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd long suspected about the universe. "People get stressed around me. I don't really get why. I'm super low-key." He leaned back into the couch, laced his fingers behind his bald head, and looked at the gloomy Victorian ceiling. "Anyway, I appreciate the food, seriously, but I do gotta figure out how to get home. That hole I fell through closed up. You guys know anybody who does, like, dimension stuff? Portals? Interdimensional travel? That kind of thing?" The peerage exchanged glances. Because the answer, of course, was yes. Several someones, in fact. A governor of fallen angels who studied sacred gears and forbidden magics for fun. Devil-high houses with millennia of research. The dimensional gap itself, and the beings who dwelled in it. Every one of them a door that Saitama could walk through, and every one of them a faction that would give a very great deal to be the one holding that door. "Yes," Rias said carefully. "We know some people who might be able to help you get home." "Oh, sweet." Saitama actually perked up. "Great. When can I meet him?" Rias opened her mouth to answer, And that was the precise moment that the wards on the old schoolhouse, the dozen layered protections that made the building invisible and impregnable to the mundane and the hostile alike, lit up all at once in a silent scream of intrusion as something enormously powerful and entirely unbothered by them knocked politely on the front door. The wards didn't fail. That was the detail Akeno fixated on afterward, the detail that told her everything about the visitor before the door even opened. The wards on the old schoolhouse were the Gremory clan's finest work, layered to turn away gods and shred anything hostile that tried to force them. A being that wanted in badly enough could break them, yes, but breaking them would light up the sky, would scream across the underworld, would be an act of war. The wards didn't break. They parted, politely, as if the intruder had simply asked them to, and they'd been unable to think of a good reason to refuse. The front door of the clubroom opened, and a man leaned in the frame with a grin like he owned the place and knew he didn't, and found that funny. "Yo," said Azazel. Heard there was a party. The reaction from the peerage was instant and total. Kiba's sword was in his hand. Koneko had shifted into a low, coiled stance. Akeno's fingers crackled with holy lightning, her smile gone knife-thin. Even Rias was on her feet, crimson power gathering at her hands, the power of destruction ready to unmake anything it touched. Because they all knew that face, that lazy grin, the black hair with its gold bangs. The Governor-General of the Grigori, the leader of the fallen angels, one of the three men whose factions had ground the Great War to its exhausted halt, a being who, by every rule of the fragile peace, had absolutely no business walking uninvited into a Devil Heir's stronghold. "Azazel," Rias said, and her voice could have frozen the sun. "You are in my clubroom, on Gremory territory, uninvited. Explain yourself in the next 5 seconds or I will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly." "Relax, relax." Azazel raised both hands, palms out, the picture of a man who had never once in his long life been in a hurry. He ambled inside anyway, hands slipping into his pockets, and the wards let him, and that alone kept anyone from attacking, because if the wards had decided he was allowed, then attacking him was a decision no one wanted to be the first to make. "I'm not here to fight anybody. Do I look like I'm here to fight? I brought no one. I'm alone." "That should tell you something." He glanced around the room with frank, cheerful curiosity, at the peerage bristling, at Issei's boosted gear half manifested on his arm, and then his eyes found the couch, and the man on it, and everything about Azazel sharpened, the lazy grin still in place, but the eyes behind it going bright and hungry and old. "There he is," Azazel breathed. Saitama looked up from the couch. He had, at some point during the standoff, acquired a third plate of curry, and he was working through it with a fork, watching the tense standoff between the terrifying beings around him, with the detached interest of a man watching a mildly diverting sports match. "You looking for me?" Saitama asked, around a mouthful. "Oh, am I ever?" Azazel walked straight past Rias's gathered power, past the power of destruction crackling at her fingertips, which she did not release, because he'd made no move, and dropped himself into the armchair across from Saitama, with the ease of an old friend. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, studying the bald man's face like a jeweler over a stone he can't identify. "You have any idea what you did tonight, friend, when you fell out of the gap?" "Made a mess," Saitama said. "I said sorry." "You lit up every high-end sensor in 3 factions," Azazel said, delighted. "You know how hard that is. You know what it takes to spike a Grigori catastrophe sensor? A god, an honest-to-badness god, has to show up and start throwing weight around before those things so much as blink." He jabbed a finger at Saitama. "You did it by falling down. And then the number they gave me was garbage, pure garbage. The instrument couldn't hold it, so I did what any reasonable person does, and I got in my car and drove here to look at you myself, because I have been alive for a very, very long time, and I am bored, and you," the grin split wide, "you are the first genuinely new thing I've seen in centuries." Rias let the power of destruction fade from her hands, slowly, because it was becoming clear that the fallen angel governor's entire agenda was, horrifyingly, curiosity, and she wasn't sure which was more dangerous. "Azazel," she said tightly, "you cannot just walk into—" I know, it's rude, I'm sorry. I'll send a fruit basket." He didn't look at her. He was still staring at Saitama, and now he did something that made the whole peerage tense all over again. He extended his own senses, the honed perception of one of the most powerful beings in existence, a fallen angel who had spent his endless life studying every kind of power there was, and reached out to read the man in the yellow suit himself. The room held its breath. Azazel's grin flickered. For just a second, the boredom and the showmanship dropped away from his face, and what was underneath was something the peerage had never seen on a leader of a faction. Not fear, exactly, but the specific vertigo of an expert, encountering a phenomenon that his entire vast expertise cannot explain. Azazel had felt the White Dragon Emperor. He had studied the Longinus, the God-Killers, 13 times over. He had stood in the presence of Ophis, the Infinity Dragon, and lived. He knew, better than almost any being alive, the exact texture of every level of power that existed in the world. And he reached for Saitama and touched nothing, and the nothing had a floor he couldn't find. "Huh," Azazel said softly. He sat back in the armchair. He was quiet for a moment. Then the grin came back, but it was a different grin now, less a showman's and more a gambler's, a man who has just seen a card that changes the whole game. "Okay," he said. "Okay, so here's what I know. I can't read you. Nobody can read you, apparently. I could feel that Citri girl's little scan spell from across town, and I felt it fail. Your output is off any scale anyone's ever built, but there's no engine driving it that anyone can find. That's not a sacred gear. That's not a dragon. That's not a god's authority. And believe me, I know what a god's authority tastes like." He tilted his head. "So what I've got is a human. A human. The sensors are clear on that much. You read human all the way down. A human who is somehow stronger than things that eat gods for breakfast. And I have exactly one question." He leaned in. "How?" Saitama looked at him. He set his fork down. He'd gotten this question a lot, from a lot of people, from heroes and monsters and scientists and reporters, all of them leaning in with that same hungry light in their eyes, all of them certain there was a secret, a technique, a forbidden method, a cheat. And the honest answer had disappointed every single one of them, because the honest answer was so stupid and so unsatisfying that nobody ever believed it, and after a while, Saitama had stopped caring whether they did. "Training," Saitama said. Azazel waited. "And?" "That's it. Training. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run. Every single day." He picked the fork back up. 3 years. No air conditioning in summer, no heat in winter. To keep you mentally tough. I lost my hair. Got strong. That's the whole thing. A silence fell over the clubroom. Azazel stared at him. Issei's mouth had dropped open. Even Kiba, sword still in hand, looked briefly derailed. "That's a lie," Azazel said, but he said it uncertainly, the way a man says a thing he desperately wants to be true because the alternative is worse. "People always say that." Saitama shrugged and went back to his curry. "You asked. I told you. I don't really care if you believe me." And that, the sheer, flat, bulletproof indifference of it, was what finally landed. Azazel had spent his life among beings who lied about their power, who inflated it, hid it, bargained with it, wielded it as leverage in the endless politics of the factions. Everyone he knew treated their strength as currency. And here was a man who treated his own impossible, world-breaking power as such a settled and boring fact of his life, that he couldn't be bothered to lie about it or brag about it, or use it for anything more ambitious than not being killed by a stray devil on his way to look for groceries. He wasn't concealing a secret. There was no secret. He'd told the truth, and it just happened to be unbelievable. Azazel began, quietly, to laugh again. "Oh, this is beautiful," he said, wiping his eye. "This is going to cause so much trouble. You have no idea. Every faction on the planet is going to lose their minds over you, and you just want a sandwich." He shook his head, grinning. "All right, Saitama, was it? Let me make you an offer, and I promise it's a good one, because I actually like you, which is more than I can say for most people I make offers to." "Azazel," Rhea started, warning. "He can hear me, Rias. He's got ears." Azazel spread his hands toward Saitama. "Grigori, my organization. We study sacred gears. We study every kind of power there is. And This is the part you'll care about. We do more work on dimensional travel, gap theory, and cross-world transit than anyone else alive. Anyone. The devils are all politics, and the angels won't touch forbidden research. But me. He tapped his own chest. I've got labs full of people who think about nothing but holes between worlds. You fell through one. You want to go home. He let it hang. I'm your best shot in this entire reality at building you a door back. Saitama's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. For the first time all evening, the bored man looked genuinely, sharply interested. Not in power, not in a fight, but in the one thing he actually wanted. You can send me home, he said. I can try, Azazel said, honest even in his pitch, which was its own kind of clever. Cross-world transit is the hardest problem there is, and I won't lie to you and say it's easy or fast. But there is no one, no god, no dragon, no clan of devils, with a better shot at cracking it than my people. That's not a boast. That's just true, and everyone in this room knows it. He glanced around at the peerage, daring them to contradict him. Nobody did. So, come work with me. Come to Grigori. Let my researchers study how you got here. With your permission, nothing invasive. You can walk out anytime you don't like it. And in exchange, I put my best minds on the problem of getting you home. Everybody wins. Absolutely not, Rias said. Azazel, you are not walking him out of Gremory territory into a fallen angel facility. Do you have any idea how that looks? He arrived here. He's under your what? Azazel's voice stayed light, but there was steel in it now, and just for a moment, the leader of the fallen angels showed through the affable scholar. Your protection, Rias, with all the love in the world. Protection implies you could protect him from something. Can you? From me? Could you stop me walking him out that door right now if he wanted to go? He let that sit, cruel only because it was true, then softened it, because he genuinely wasn't trying to be cruel. He's not a possession, Rias. He's not your peerage member, and he's not my recruit. He's a grown man who fell out of the sky and wants to go home. So how about we let him decide, like he's a person, instead of the two of us fighting over him like he's a chess piece? He turned back to Saitama, and the grin returned. What do you say, hero? I'm not asking you to swear loyalty, or join a faction, or fight anybody's war. I'm asking if you want help getting home, from the guy most likely to actually pull it off. No strings I can't show you up front. Saitama looked from Azazel to Rias and back. He was, the peerage was realizing, not nearly as slow as his flat affect made him seem. He'd clearly registered the tension in the room, the way these powerful people kept talking around him and about him and over him, the way the red-haired girl clearly distrusted the grinning man, and the grinning man clearly held some kind of power over all of them. You two don't get along, Saitama observed. We're from factions that fought a war for millennia, Azazel said cheerfully. It's complicated. Uh-huh. Saitama set his empty plate aside, the third one now, and rubbed the back of his bald head, thinking it over with the plodding, honest deliberation of a man who genuinely tried to be fair. Okay, look, Rias, right? You and your friends were nice to me. The little nun made me curry. I'm not gonna just ditch you the second some other guy shows up. He nodded at Asia, who flushed. But, he turned to Azazel, if you're actually the best shot at getting me home, then I kinda gotta talk to you, right? That's just the reasonable thing. He frowned. Is there a way I do both? Like, I stay friends with the curry people, but I also let your science guys figure out the going home thing. Azazel opened his mouth to close the deal, and the wards on the schoolhouse lit up a second time, and this time they did not part politely. This time they shrieked, a raw wail of alarm, as something came through them the hard way, tearing at the Gremory clan's finest work with a light that burned holy and hostile, and utterly unlike Azazel's easy intrusion. Kiba was already turning toward the windows, and the color had drained from his face, because he knew that light. He'd know it anywhere. He'd built his entire life around hating it. Excalibur, he whispered. Through the tall windows of the old schoolhouse, 3 figures in traveling cloaks were striding across the courtyard toward the door, and at the hip of the one in front, a wrapped bundle blazed with the unmistakable, soul-deep radiance of a holy sword. The church had come to Kuoh, and they had felt the anomaly too. The door didn't open this time. It came off its hinges. The lead figure kicked it in, not out of malice, Kiba would realize later, but out of a warrior's habit of controlling a threshold before crossing it, and strode into the clubroom with a wrapped greatsword across her back and the settled, ready calm of someone who had walked into far worse rooms than this one. She was young, blue hair with a single green fringe, and she moved like a blade half drawn. Behind her came a second young woman, chestnut hair in twin tails, bouncing on the balls of her feet with a nervous energy at odds with the holy war gear she wore. And behind both of them, older, robed, came a priest whose eyes were already sweeping the room, counting devils, marking exits. By the authority of the church, the blue-haired one announced, her hand on the wrapped hilt at her back. No one moves. We're here for... She stopped. Her eyes had found Saitama, and her whole body went rigid, because Zenobia Quarta had been sent to Kuoh to recover stolen holy swords, but she had also been briefed, in the way the church briefed its blades, cryptically, ominously, that something had entered this region, that the Vatican's own instruments had flagged as a potential threat to the order of creation, a power reading that the church's holiest sensing relics had logged and then, in the words of the panicked cardinal who'd redirected her here, could not close their eyes to. She had been told to assess it. She had been told, if it proved to be a devil or a servant of the fallen, to purify it. She had expected a monster. She was looking at a bald man in a tracksuit eating curry. You, Zenobia said. The reading. That was you. Oh, come on, Saitama said, mostly to himself. Is that going to be everybody's opening line now? Zenobia, the twin-tailed girl behind her had gone pale, tugging at her partner's cloak, staring not at Saitama, but at the armchair. That's, Zenobia, that's a fallen angel. That's a high one. Look at his, that's a governor, that's... Irina Shido's voice climbed toward panic. And that's a devil peerage, a full one. And, what is happening? We were told there'd be one target. This is... Grigori, Zenobia breathed, following Irina's gaze to Azazel, and now her greatsword was coming off her back, the wrappings falling away to reveal Excalibur destruction, a blade that hummed with light, that made every devil in the room flinch. The fallen angels and the devils, in one room, around the anomaly. This is a conspiracy. This is a misunderstanding, Rhea said sharply. And you have drawn a holy sword in my clubroom, exorcist. Think very carefully about your next move. You are two blades and a priest, standing in the middle of a devil peerage on devil territory, and you are wildly outnumbered. We are servants of God, Zenobia said, level and unafraid, Excalibur steady in her grip. We do not fear numbers. You should fear him, Azazel said mildly, not getting up from the armchair, and jerked a thumb at Saitama. But go on. This is educational. It happened fast then, the way these things do. A room full of beings bred and trained for war, each convinced the others were the threat, the pressure building past the point where anyone could pull it back. Irina, terrified and cornered, saw Koneko shift and read it as an attack and flung a bright lance of light on pure reflex. Koneko dodged. The light punched a smoking hole in the wall. Aquino's holy lightning answered before Rias could stop her, and Zenobia moved to intercept it with Excalibur, and Kiba was already lunging for the holy sword with all the fury of his murdered comrades behind him, and the priest was chanting something, and Issei was yelling, and the entire clubroom detonated into the beginning of a fight that would have leveled the building and, given who was in it, possibly the block. The greatsword and the demon blade were a handspan from meeting. The holy lance was mid-air. The lightning was arcing. Rias's power of destruction was flaring up in a desperate attempt to shield her people. And then Saitama was standing in the middle of all of it. Nobody saw him move. One instant he was on the couch with a plate of curry. The next he was simply there, in the dead center of the room, having crossed the space between without any of the dozen combat-honed beings present perceiving so much as a blur. He caught Zenovia's Excalibur between two fingers, on the flat of a holy sword forged to slay devils, a blade that hummed with the sacred power of God's own arsenal, and it stopped, utterly, as though she'd swung it into a mountain. He caught Kiba's demon blade with his other hand, palm flat against the edge, and that stopped too. The holy lance Irina had thrown struck him in the back of the head and burst against his bald scalp with a flash and a crack that should have punched through a tank. and he didn't so much as flinch. It just stopped being, absorbed into the same fundamental nothing that had eaten the stray devil, and he reached up with a third motion Rias's eyes couldn't quite follow, and plucked Akeno's holy lightning out of the air like a man catching a thrown ball, and closed his fist, and it was gone. The clubroom went absolutely silent. Saitama stood in the middle of it, holding a holy greatsword still with 2 fingers, and a demonic blade still with 1 palm, a man who had just neutralized 4 separate lethal attacks, from 4 different supernatural powers, in the space of a single breath, and he looked deeply, profoundly annoyed. "Okay," he said. "Everybody knock it off." He wasn't loud. He didn't have to be. There was something in the flat, tired weight of it, the weariness of a man who had broken up 100 pointless fights, who found violence not frightening but boring, who could not for the life of him understand why everyone he met wanted so badly to hit each other, and the sheer casual impossibility of what they'd all just watched. The holy sword stopped with 2 fingers. The lightning caught bare-handed. The light lance dying against his skull like a soap bubble did what no amount of shouting or threatening could have. It made them stop. Zenobia stared at the 2 fingers pinching her blade. She pulled. Excalibur destruction did not move. She braced her feet and hauled with all the strength the church had trained into her, all the power the holy sword lent its wielder, and the man holding it didn't even look at her. He was busy glaring at the room in general. She might as well have been trying to pull a sword out of the earth's core. That's impossible," she said, and for the first time her level composure cracked. "That's a holy sword. You should be." "I should be what?" Saitama looked at her. "You keep saying that." "Everybody keeps saying I should be something." He let go of both blades. Zenobia stumbled backward as hers came free, Kiba's demon sword nearly clattering to the floor before he caught it, and Saitama stepped back into the center of the room, hands going to his hips. "Look, I don't know what any of you are. Devils, angels, fallen whatevers, church people. I don't care. Genuinely, I don't. I don't have a side. I fell out of a hole in the sky. I got attacked. I'm trying to find a way home, and about 10 of you have now either scanned me, made me an offer, or tried to stab me, all in like an hour." He rubbed his temple. "So here's how it's gonna go. Nobody hits anybody in here. If you want to fight each other about your holy swords and your factions and your ancient war, take it outside and away from the Curry people, because they were nice to me, and I don't want their clubhouse wrecked." He looked around at all of them, and his flat gaze held a weight none of them could name. "And if anybody's got a problem with those rules, they can take it up with me, one at a time, outside, right now." A pause. "Anybody?" No one moved. Zenobia, holy sword lowered, looked at the bald man for a long moment. She was a warrior of faith, trained from childhood, and her instincts had never once failed her about the nature of an opponent. And every instinct she had was telling her the same thing the devil's senses had told everyone else, that the being in front of her existed on a level she could not challenge, could not comprehend, could not even properly see, and that, more disorienting still, he had no interest in her destruction. He had caught 4 lethal blows and returned exactly none of them. He had disarmed a room without hurting a soul. A monster would have killed them. A holy being would have judged them. This man had told them to knock it off and go home. "What are you?" she said, and it wasn't a demand this time. It was almost a prayer. "A guy," Saitama said, for what felt to him like the 50th time. Just a guy. Azazel, still lounging in the armchair through the entire near catastrophe, applauded slowly. "See, this," the fallen angel governor said, delighted, "is what I've been trying to tell all of you. You keep treating him like a bomb to be defused, or a weapon to be claimed. He's not. He's a referee. He just walked into the single most violent room on the planet and made everyone in it behave, and he did it without killing anybody, which none of you clowns were capable of." He rose from the chair, finally, and spread his arms. "Zenobia Quarta, is it? Church's finest. And Irina Shidu. I know your masters. Let me save everybody a lot of time." He nodded at Saitama. "Whatever your Vatican relics told you was here. They're right. It's real. It's him. And no, you can't purify it. You can't fight it. And you definitely can't recruit it for the church. Because look at him. Does he look like he's joining anybody's holy order? Saitama, at that moment, was checking whether there was any curry left on his abandoned plate. So you've got two options. You can go back to your cardinals and tell them the anomaly is an unaligned neutral party who wants to go home and doesn't care about your war, which is the truth. Or you can keep pointing holy swords at him and find out, personally, what happens next. Your call. But if you swing at him again in this room, I'm not stepping in. And neither is Rias. And I don't think the little nun can heal that. Zenobia looked at Saitama. She looked at the smoking hole. Irina's own deflected light had torn in the wall. She looked at the two-fingered dent that no longer existed on a blade that should have been unstoppable. Slowly, deliberately, she sheathed Excalibur destruction across her back. Irina, she said, stand down. But, he caught your light lance with his skull, Irina. Zenovia's voice was flat with the specific calm of someone recalibrating their entire understanding of reality. We report, we do not engage. She turned to Rias and inclined her head a precise, formal degree, one professional acknowledging another after a battle that didn't happen. Gremory, we came here tracking a holy sword thief named Fried Selzen and a rogue named Valper Galilei, who we believe are operating in this territory under a fallen angel's protection. Her eyes cut to Azazel. That is our actual mission. The anomaly was a secondary directive. If your people are not sheltering the sword thief, then our business here is separate, and I'd sooner it stayed that way. She paused. Given the alternative. We're not sheltering anyone, Rias said. And if there's a fallen angel running a holy sword operation in my territory, her eyes went to Azazel, hard-maying, then that's the first I'm hearing of it, and Azazel and I are going to have a conversation about it. Wasn't me, Azazel said, and for once he wasn't grinning. But I know exactly who it was. And it's a much bigger problem than a few stolen swords, and it's the actual reason I came to Kuoh tonight. The anomaly just got here first. His voice dropped, and the whole room felt the temperature of the conversation change. There's a rogue in my ranks, one of the old ones, from the Great War, who never wanted the peace. He's been gathering the stolen Excaliburs and Valper's research, and he's building towards something in this town. And if he pulls it off, it restarts the war between all three factions. He looked around at them, devils, exorcists, a bald man with an empty curry plate. His name is Kokabiel, and he is going to burn Kuoh to the ground to do it. At the name, Saitama looked up, finally, from his plate. This Kokabiel guy, he said. He's strong. Azazel considered the being who could not be measured, and answered honestly. Strong enough to be a real problem for everyone in this room, he said. Except, I'm guessing, one of them. Saitama nodded slowly and set down his fork. And for just a moment, the first time all night, there was a flicker of something behind the boredom in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, something almost like hope. Huh, said Saitama. A real fight. The flicker of hope in Saitama's eyes lasted almost 4 full seconds. Then Azazel kept talking, and the details came out. The scale of Kokabiel's power, his rank in the old hierarchy, the war he'd fought in, and Saitama did the arithmetic he'd done 1,000 times before, the arithmetic that always came out the same way, and the hope drained out of his face like water out of a cracked cup. Strong enough to be a problem for everyone in the room except me, Saitama repeated slowly. So, not a problem for me. I'd be stunned if he was, Azazel admitted. Right. Saitama picked his fork back up, but he didn't eat. He just turned it over in his fingers, staring at nothing, and the peerage watched something they didn't have a name for settle over the most powerful being they'd ever met. So it's another one-punch guy. Somebody talks him up, everybody's scared of him, and then I hit him once and it's over, and everybody looks at me like I cheated. He set the fork down again. Yeah, I know how this one goes. Nobody in the room understood, yet, what they were looking at. Kiba, watching, thought at first it was arrogance. The casual dismissal of a threat that terrified everyone else. But it wasn't. There was no pride in it. If anything, the bald man looked smaller now than he had a minute ago. Deflated. The brief spark of anticipation replaced by something gray and familiar and tired. Kiba had spent his whole life defined by a hunger for a fight. The fight. The revenge that gave his existence its shape. He could not imagine what it would do to a person to know, with total certainty, before every battle, that there was no fight, that he would win, that he would always win, instantly, and feel nothing, and be handed one more empty victory in an endless line of them. He was, he realized, looking at exactly that person. The Excalibur situation had a subplot, and the subplot had Kiba's name written all over it. While Azazel and Rias moved to the corner to trade what each knew about Kokabiel's movements, the fallen governor sketching out the rogue's likely timeline, Rias grimly cataloging what her territory could and couldn't withstand. Zenobia and Irina had stayed, uneasily, because the church wanted the Excaliburs back, and the devils wanted Kokabiel stopped, and for one strange night their missions had aligned. And Kiba had spent the whole conversation staring at the wrapped blade on Zenovia's back with an expression that had nothing tired in it at all. "That sword," Kiba said, when the tactical talk hit a lull. "Excalibur. There are fragments of it. 7. When it shattered. Excalibur was broken and reforged into 7 blades. Yes," Zenobia said warily. "I carry destruction. Irina carries mimic. The others are scattered. Several were stolen. That's what we're here to recover." "The Holy Sword Project," Kiba said, and his voice had gone flat and cold, in a way none of his peerage had ever heard from the bright, easy swordsman. "Valper Galilee's project, the one that took church orphans, children, and tested whether they could wield the holy swords. And when they couldn't, when the experiment failed them, it disposed of them, all of them, together, in one room." Zenobia had gone very still. "You know about the Holy Sword Project. I'm the only one who walked out of it," Kiba said. "The rest of them died in that room so a scientist could measure whether their corpses had the right factor in their blood. I carry them with me, every one. And now you're telling me the man who did it, Valper, is here, in this town, working for the fallen angel who wants to burn it down." A demon sword grew slowly out of his open hand, black and cold. "I've spent my whole second life waiting to find him." Saitama, from the couch, watched this. He didn't know the history. He'd caught maybe a third of it, but he knew the shape of it. A young guy with an old wound, holding a sword, talking about the people who died. Saitama had been a lot of places and seen a lot of that particular shape, and something about it made him get up off the couch and wander over, hands in his pockets, and stand next to the blonde swordsman looking at nothing in particular. "Hey," Saitama said, "you, shampoo commercial guy." Kiba blinked, thrown out of his cold fury. "Kiba, Yuto Kiba." "Kiba, right." Saitama nodded at the black sword in his hand. "This Valper guy, the one who killed your friends, you want to kill him yourself, right? Not because it's smart, not because it helps with the war thing, just because it's yours to do." Kiba's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Yeah." Saitama nodded again, slowly, like a man confirming a weather report. "Okay, so don't let me do it, or any of these other guys." He tilted his head toward the room full of terrifying beings. "I could probably end your whole revenge thing in about half a second, if it came down to it. Punch the bad guy. Done. Over. And I'm gonna be honest with you, man." And here, something genuinely earnest cut through the boredom. "The closest thing to advice Saitama ever gave anyone. That would be the worst thing I could do to you. Trust me. I know." Kiba stared at him. "When somebody just hands you the win," Saitama said, "when it's over before you did anything, before it cost you anything, it doesn't feel like anything. There's nothing in it. You spend all that time getting ready and then it's just gone. And you're standing there holding nothing, and you don't even get to be sad about it the right way." He shrugged, hands still in his pockets. "So do it yourself. Whatever this is for you. Earn it, even if it's harder. Especially if it's harder. Take it from a guy who never gets to." He turned to wander back to the couch, then stopped. "And if the bad guy's about to kill you, and you're actually gonna die, yell. I'll step in. Dying doesn't teach you anything. But short of that," he waved a hand, "it's yours. I'll stay out of it." He went back to the couch and sat down, and picked his fork back up like he hadn't just said the most important thing anyone would say to Kiba all year. Kiba stood there for a long moment, the demon sword in his hand, and something in his chest, the cold, murderous thing that had been running his second life, shifted, and settled, and became something he could actually hold. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't mention it." Saitama had found more curry. Seriously, don't. It's embarrassing. Across the room, Rias had watched the whole exchange, and her read on Saitama updated one more time, in a direction she hadn't expected. She'd been treating him as a force of nature, an unmeasurable, uncontrollable power that had landed in her territory. She was starting to understand she'd been wrong about the important part. The power was real, but the power wasn't the man. The man was something else, something lonely and decent, and profoundly, achingly bored, who understood Kiba's wound better than anyone in the room, because he was carrying the inverse of it. Not a fight he couldn't win, but a life of nothing but fights he couldn't lose. "He's not a weapon," Rias murmured to Aquino, who'd come to stand beside her. "No," Aquino agreed softly, her usual teasing lilt gone. "He's a very tired man who wants to go home." She watched Saitama accept another plate from Asia with pathetic gratitude. Which, when you think about it, is far more dangerous than a weapon. A weapon you can aim. A weapon has an owner. Her dark eyes were thoughtful. He has no owner, no side, and nothing anyone can offer him except the one thing he actually wants, which the fallen angel over there just claimed he can provide. She glanced at Azazel. Whoever gets him home earns his gratitude, and the gratitude of a being like that is the single most valuable thing in the world. Every faction is about to realize it at the same time. They came to a plan, of a kind, before the night was out. Azazel would return to Grigori and confirm Kokabiel's timeline, and, reluctantly, because it strained the not-yet-signed peace to breaking, coordinate quietly with Rias's peerage and the two exorcists to stop the rogue before he could complete whatever ritual the stolen Excaliburs were for. The church blades and the devils would work together, this once, because the alternative was the Great War reignited over their heads. Kiba would get his shot at Valper, on his own terms, with the peerage as backup, and Saitama will absolutely not be used as a weapon in your war, Rias said firmly, because he's a person, not artillery, and I won't have it. Agreed, Azazel said, surprising her. For once we agree. I'm not putting the unmeasurable neutral party in the middle of a faction fight. Do you have any idea what it does to the balance of power if word gets out that Grigori deployed him? Every faction on Earth would treat it as us fielding a superweapon. We'd have a war about him inside a week. He shook his head. No. He stays out of it. If Kokabiel is stupid enough to swing at him, that's Kokabiel's funeral, and none of us have to explain a thing. But nobody points him at anybody. He's not a piece we get to move. Saitama, being discussed in the third person yet again, raised a hand from the couch. You know I can hear you, right? And I already said I don't have a side. He put the hand down. I'll help the Curry people if their town's actually getting burned down, 'cause that's just the decent thing. But I'm not fighting your war, and I'm not joining your club, and I'm not anybody's weapon. I'm going home the second the science guy figures out the door. He pointed his fork at Azazel. Which you're gonna start working on, right? That was the deal. I don't get in your way about Kokabiel. You get to study how I got here, and you build me the door home. That's the deal. That's the deal, Azazel confirmed, and meant it, mostly. Cool. Saitama went back to eating. Then we're good. It was, everyone in the room understood, a fragile and temporary and entirely unprecedented arrangement. Devils, fallen angels, and the church, all cooperating around a bald man who wanted nothing from any of them. It would not survive contact with Kokabiel. It would not survive contact with devil-high politics, once the underworld learned what was sitting on Rias Gremory's couch. And it would very much not survive the attention of the beings who dwelt above all of them, who had felt the dimensional gap open, and were, even now, beginning to turn their vast and ancient regard toward the anomaly in Kuoh. But for one night, in an old schoolhouse it held, far below Kuoh, in the deep underworld, in a hall of crimson and gold where the Gremory clan held court, a man with the same crimson hair as Rias, but a good deal more power, set down a report he had read 3 times. Sirzex Lucifer, one of the 4 great Satans, the strongest devil of his generation, wielder of the power of destruction refined past anything his little sister could yet manage, sat very still. Run it again, he said to the aide beside him. The reading from Kufr. All of it. My lord, the instrument reset itself. It couldn't hold the... I know it couldn't hold it. Sirzex's voice was gentle, which was when Sirzex was at his most dangerous. That's what I want you to understand. Ajuka built that instrument. Ajuka's instruments do not fail. If it could not hold the number, then the number was larger than anything Ajuka thought was possible when he built it. Larger than a Satan, larger than a Longinus, larger than the gods it was calibrated against. He stood, slowly, and it happened in my sister's territory. Around my sister. His eyes, when he raised them, held a father's fear and a Satan's cold calculation in equal measure. Ready the transport, and send word ahead to Rios. He paused. Tell her. Her brother is coming to Kuoh, and he would very much like to meet her house guest. Sirzex Lucifer did not travel light, and he did not travel unnoticed. When a Satan moved through the underworld, reality made room. The transport that carried him and his queen toward the boundary between worlds was a thing of crimson power and Gremory craftsmanship, but it was the man inside it who bent the space around it, the sheer settled weight of him pressing on the fabric of things. Beside him sat Graphia Lucifuge, his queen, his wife, the silver-haired maid whose composure had never once cracked in 10,000 years of service, and across from him, invited at the last moment because Sirzex was not a fool and knew when to bring insurance, sat a third figure whose presence made even the transport's crystalline walls hum faintly with unease. You've read the report, Sirzex said. I read the error, said Ajuka Beelzebub, which is more interesting than any report. The green-haired Satan, the genius of the four, the mind that had created the evil pieces system that let devils rebuild their species, the being widely considered the single most intelligent entity in the underworld, sat with his fingers steepled, and his usually unreadable face wore, very faintly, the expression of a man who had encountered a problem worth his time. I built that sensor array, Sirzex. I built it to measure everything. I calibrated it against Great Red. He let that sit. Against Great Red, the dragon of dragons, the strongest existence in the world. I set the ceiling of that instrument, above the strongest thing that exists, with margin, because I do not build instruments that can be overwhelmed. And it was overwhelmed. It was not overwhelmed. Ajuka's eyes glittered. That's the part you're not appreciating. It did not max out. A maxed out reading is still a reading, still a number, just the biggest one the machine can express. It did something worse. It attempted to represent the value and found no representation, the way a calculator doesn't return error because a number is too big, but because you asked it to divide by 0, because the question itself is malformed. He leaned forward. Whatever is in Kuoh did not produce a power reading too large for my instrument. It produced a power reading that my instrument's entire model of what power is could not accommodate. Those are not the same failure, Sirzex. The first means something very strong. The second means something categorically outside the framework. A thin smile. I have not encountered that failure in the entire history of my work. I confess, I'm looking forward to meeting it. Graphia spoke for the first time, her voice cool and even. And if meeting it provokes it, my lords, a being that broke Lord Beelzebub's instrument by existing. If we arrive in force, if it reads our arrival as a threat, then we die, Sirzex said simply. And the point is moot, because there is nothing the underworld could field that would matter, which is precisely why we are not arriving in force. He gestured, and the crimson power around them dimmed to something almost gentle. 2 Satans and a queen, no army, no display. We come to my sister's territory as family visiting family, and we meet her guest, and we find out what it wants, because Ajuka is right about the important thing. His face had gone grave. A power outside the framework cannot be deterred by the framework. Everything we know how to do, alliances, treaties, the balance of factions, mutual destruction, all of it assumes measurable forces. This is not a measurable force, so we cannot threaten it, and we cannot fight it, and we cannot ignore it. We can only ask it, politely, what it would like, and hope the answer is something we can live with. Ajuka's smile widened a fraction. You're frightened, Sirzex. I have a little sister on that couch beside the thing, Sirzex said. Of course I'm frightened. I'd be a fool not to be. He looked out at the churning boundary between worlds sliding past. The question that keeps me awake is very simple, Ajuka. What does a being with unlimited power actually want? Every schemer I've ever known wanted more power, and I understood them, because I understood the wanting. But a being that already has all of it, he shook his head. I don't know what that being wants. And a thing you can't understand the wants of is a thing you can't predict. And a thing you can't predict, at that scale, is the most dangerous thing there has ever been. He was quiet a moment, or the safest. Depending entirely on what it happens to want, which is why we're going to go find out, and be very, very courteous while we do. There was another party watching Kuoh that night. It did not travel in a crimson transport, and it did not announce itself, and it had no interest in being courteous. At the edge of the dimensional gap, that gray-black nowhere between all worlds, where colors slid over each other and reality thinned to nothing, a serpent the size of a thought turned a fraction of its infinite attention toward a single point in a single world, and considered. Ophis did not have feelings the way lesser beings did. The Ouroboros dragon, the infinity dragon, one of the two apex existences of all creation, wanted precisely one thing, and had wanted it for longer than most gods had existed: silence. The return of Ophis to the dimensional gap, the home from which Great Red had displaced the Ouroboros, so that Ophis could return to the stillness that was Ophis's nature. Every scheme Ophis had ever set in motion, every alliance, every terror coalition gathered under the banner of the Chaos Brigade, served that single quiet goal: remove Great Red, reclaim the silence. Ophis had felt the gap tear open above Kuoh. Ophis felt everything that happened to the gap. The gap was Ophis's home and its wound. And something had come through the gap, not from within it, the way Great Red swam within it, but from outside, from another world entirely, punched clean through the membrane between realities. Things did not do that. The membrane did not permit it. Great Red could not do it. Ophis, arguably, could not do it. And yet a small, bald, bored thing in a yellow suit had fallen through it as easily as a stone through paper, and the tear had sealed behind it as though nothing had happened. For the first time in an age, Ophis was interested, not afraid. Ophis, the infinity dragon, did not fear, but interested, in the flat, alien way that infinity is interested, the interest of a thing that has understood the shape of all power for eons, suddenly encountering a shape it does not recognize. If this new thing was as strong as its arrival suggested, then it was a variable in the equation Ophis had been solving for millennia. A variable that could, perhaps, remove Great Red, or a variable that could remove Ophis. Either way, a variable that had to be understood, and, if possible, acquired. The way Ophis acquired everything useful, by offering it a piece of infinity and a place in the coming quiet. The Ouroboros turned its regard on the small bald thing eating curry in a devil's clubroom, and began, slowly, with the patience of an eternal being, to move. Saitama, who could delete gods and had no idea that two Satans and an eternal dragon god were currently converging on his location, was having a mild crisis about laundry. "I've been wearing this for 2 days," he informed Asia, plucking at the yellow jumpsuit, "and I did that whole punch thing in it, and the monster kind of got on it. Is there a washing machine in this magic school? Or do you guys, spell the clothes clean?" There's a machine in the back," Asia said, flustered by the ordinariness of the request in the middle of everything. "I can show you. Do you have other clothes to wear while it—" "Nah, I'll just wait." Saitama considered. "In a towel, I guess. Is that weird?" "Please wear more than a towel," Ria said, from across the room, with the weary firmness of a woman managing a houseguest, who happened to be the strongest being in creation. "There's spare gym clothes in the club storage. Issei, find him something." "On it, President." Issei, who had appointed himself Saitama's unofficial fanboy over the course of the night, scrambled off, delighted to be useful. It was, Rias reflected, watching the strongest being she had ever encountered fret about a curry stain, the single most surreal night of her life. And it was about to get considerably more surreal, because the crimson magic circle in the center of the clubroom floor had just begun, silently, to glow. She knew that crest. Everyone in her peerage knew that crest. It was her own, the Gremory seal, but weighted with an authority hers did not yet carry. "Everyone up," she said, and her voice changed, and the peerage snapped to attention at the shift in it. "Now, bow when he arrives, and do not say anything foolish." My brother is here. The magic circle flared crimson bright, and power rolled off it in a wave that made every devil in the room drop instinctively to one knee. The raw, overwhelming pressure of a Satan, of the strongest devil of the age, a weight of demonic majesty that pressed the air out of the room. Zenobia and Irina, no devils, still staggered under it, hands going to holy weapons on pure reflex. It was the pressure of a being at the absolute top of the devil world, a being whose displeasure could unmake clans, and it filled the old schoolhouse to the rafters. Saitama, adjusting the borrowed gym shorts Issei had just handed him, glanced at the blinding crimson light and the figure resolving within it, and registered exactly none of the crushing pressure that had everyone else on their knees. "Oh hey," he said. "More people. Is this the going-home science guy?" Sirzex Lucifer stepped out of the light, crimson-haired, impossibly poised, radiating a power that his own sister had never seen turned up this high, took in the room of kneeling devils and braced exorcists in a single glance, and settled his gaze, finally, on the bald man in borrowed gym shorts, who was looking at him with polite, mild, completely unintimidated curiosity. And Sirzex Lucifer, one of the four great Satans, the strongest devil of his generation, felt his own senses reach out toward the being in front of him, and touch a floor that wasn't there, and understood, all at once and all the way down, exactly why Ajuka's instrument had broken. "Ah," Sirzex said softly. Behind him, Ajuka Beelzebub stepped from the circle, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the smartest being in the underworld looked at something, and did not have a single framework to put it in, and smiled like a child handed a gift. "No," Sirzex said, to Saitama's question, recovering his composure with the discipline of a king. "No, I'm not the science person. Forgive me." He inclined his head, a Satan, bowing a precise and deliberate degree to a man in borrowed shorts, an act that made his sister's breath catch. "My name is Sirzex. I'm Rias's older brother, and I've come a very long way to meet you." Sirzex Lucifer was, by universal agreement, one of the most powerful beings in the underworld and one of the most gracious. He had spent centuries mastering the art of making anyone, trembling new peerage member or rival clan head, feel at ease in his presence. He turned that art on Saitama now with everything he had. It didn't do much, because Saitama was already at ease. Saitama was at ease the way a mountain is at ease. There was simply nothing Sirzex could offer or threaten that registered as reason to be otherwise. "So you're the boss of the devils," Saitama said, sitting back down on the couch and gesturing for the Satans to take the armchairs, which, after a beat of pure protocol vertigo, a Satan being offered a seat by a man in gym shorts, they did. "And you came all the way here to look at me, 'cause I broke your machine." "You did break my machine," Ajuka said, before Sirzex could deploy any diplomacy. The green-haired Satan had eyes only for Saitama, and they were bright with a scholar's rapture. "I've been trying to understand how for the entire journey. May I ask you some questions? They'll seem strange." "Everybody's got questions," Saitama sighed. "Sure, shoot." What followed was, to the peerage watching, one of the most disorienting conversations they had ever witnessed. The smartest being in the underworld, interrogating the strongest being in creation, and getting nowhere, gloriously, wonderfully nowhere. Ajuka asked about the source of his power, and Saitama said training. Ajuka asked what kind of training could produce an output that broke the model of power itself, and Saitama described push-ups. Ajuka, visibly, tried to accept that 100 push-ups a day for 3 years had produced a being that could delete gods, failed to accept it, and then, this was the part that Rias found most remarkable, set the impossibility of it aside, because he was a true scientist, and the data was the data, even when the explanation was absurd. Ajuka asked whether Saitama had a limit. Saitama thought about it honestly, the way he thought about everything, and said, "I don't know, never found one." Ajuka asked whether that frightened him. Saitama said no, and then, after a pause, said the thing that reframed the whole night for everyone listening. "The scary part isn't not having a limit," Saitama said, turning his fork over in his fingers. "The scary part is that when you don't have a limit, nothing means anything. You win everything. You beat everybody. And beating everybody feels exactly like beating nobody, because there was never a chance you'd lose. So you stop feeling the wins, then you stop feeling the losses, 'cause there aren't any. Then you kinda stop feeling stuff in general. He looked up, and his flat gaze held something that made even a Juka go quiet. That's the limit nobody warns you about, not how strong you can get. How much you stop caring on the way up. I got all the way to the top and there's nothing here, just me, being bored, hitting stuff that breaks in one punch. He shrugged. So no, not scared. Scared would be something. Scared would be nice. The clubroom was silent. Sirzex Lucifer looked at the being he had crossed worlds to assess as a threat, and understood that he had been asking the wrong question the entire journey. He had wanted to know what a being with unlimited power wanted, and the answer, it turned out, was heartbreakingly simple, and not remotely dangerous, and far sadder than anything he'd feared. You want to feel something, Sirzex said quietly. That's all. That's the whole of it. I want a good fight, Saitama said. One time. Somebody who doesn't fall down when I hit them. Somebody I actually have to try against. He said it without self-pity, which made it worse. And I want to go home, 'cause my life's there, and there was a sale I missed. That's my whole wish list, man. A real fight and a bus ticket home. I'm not gonna take over your underworld. I don't want your throne. What would I even do with it? Be bored somewhere fancier? Sirzex and Ajuka exchanged a long look. Something passed between the two Satans. An entire recalibration of policy, conducted in a glance between beings who had ruled together for centuries. Then let me be honest with you, Sirzex said, because I think honesty is the only currency you'll respect, and I'd rather earn your goodwill than fail to earn your fear. He folded his hands. You are, right now, the single most consequential being in our world, and you have no idea, and you don't care, and that combination is unprecedented and, frankly, a relief, because a being like you, who wanted something from us, would be a catastrophe. There would be nothing we could refuse you. But you want a good fight, and a way home, and one of those we might actually be able to help with, and the other, a faint, rueful smile. The other, I'm afraid, the whole architecture of our world is set up to prevent, because a fight you'd find satisfying is a fight that could destroy realities. Yeah, Saitama said glumly. Story of my life. But there's someone coming who might interest you, Ajuka said, and there was something careful in the way he said it. Someone I would strongly advise against, and cannot stop, and suspect you'll want to meet anyway. He glanced at Sirzex. We felt it too. On the way here, we weren't the only ones who noticed the gap tear. What? Saitama said, sitting up a little. Someone strong? The strongest, Sirzex said, and for the first time, real gravity entered his voice. Or one of the two strongest that exist. We'll come back to that, first. And his gaze sharpened, the king reasserting himself over the diplomat. First, there is a much more immediate problem, one that's going to arrive tonight, and it's the reason I actually need to move quickly. He looked at Rias, little sister. The Grigori governor was here. Azazel. Where did he go? Back to Grigori, to confirm Kokabiel's timeline, Rias said. Brother, there's a rogue fallen angel. I know about Kokabiel. Sirzex's voice was grim. The underworld has been tracking the stolen Excaliburs for weeks. I did not realize he'd moved his operation to your territory, or how close he was to completion. He rose from the armchair, and the temperature of the room dropped. That's the real reason I couldn't wait for a formal channel. Kokabiel isn't planning a raid, Rias. He's planning a massacre. He wants to kill you. The little sister of a Satan and the little sister of Leviathan, both attending the same school, in a way spectacular enough that the devils have to retaliate. He wants to force the Great War back open by making the peace too bloody to sustain, and he's chosen Kuoh Academy as the stage, and he's chosen tonight, because he felt the anomaly arrive and he's decided the chaos of it is his cover. He looked at Saitama. He thinks a distracted board is a board he can flip. And that was when the sky over Kuoh Academy split open with the beating of black wings, and a laugh like grinding stone rolled down over the town, and Kokabiel arrived. He hung in the air above the school, and he was terrible. 10 black wings, the mark of a high fallen angel, one of the old ones from the Great War, spread against a sky he had smeared blood red with his own power. Kokabiel was massive, armored, grinning down at the town with the specific joy of a being who had waited centuries for permission to do violence and had finally decided he no longer needed permission. Around him, torn out of the dimensional folds, floated 4 of the 7 Excalibur fragments, stolen and reassembled, humming with a corrupted holy light. Below him, on the school grounds, a defiled magic array had been carved into the earth, the ritual that would use the holy sword's clashing power to tear a wound in the treaty magic binding the 3 factions, and let the war pour back through. "Devils!" Kokabiel's voice rolled across Kuoh like thunder. "I know you're down there. Surzex Lucifer's precious little sister, Seraphol Leviathan's precious little sister. Come out and die, so your brothers have to come and avenge you, and we can finally stop pretending this pathetic peace was ever going to last." He flung wide his arms, and light spears the size of trees bloomed around him, each one enough to obliterate a city block. "I'll gut this whole town if I have to. I'll drown Kuoh in blood until the war I was built for comes back to me." The peerage was already moving, Rias marshalling them, Akankano's wings snapping out, Kiba's sword forming, Zenobia and Irina drawing their holy blades, everyone flooding out of the schoolhouse toward the array. Surzex's hand came up, crimson power gathering, ready to end the rogue fallen angel in a single strike that would have left nothing. "No," Saitama said. Everyone stopped. He'd stood up off the couch. He was still in the borrowed gym shorts and a club t-shirt 2 sizes too small, holding, absurdly, a fork, and he was looking up at the sky, at Kokabiel, at the 10 black wings, and the blood-red sky, and the tree-sized spears of light, with an expression the peerage had not seen on him even once, all night. He looked awake. "Hang on," Saitama said. "Hang on, hang on. 10 wings. Talked up as a big deal. Whole sky changed color. Everyone's scared of him." He was, Rias realized with dawning horror, doing the math he'd described earlier, the terrible math, the math that always came out the same. But this time, for the first time, he wasn't sure of the answer, because Surzex had said the strongest that exists was coming, and something in Saitama had grabbed onto that and refused to let go. "Is this him? The strong one you said was coming? Is this the guy who won't fall in one punch?" "No," Surzex said. "That's Kokabiel. He's dangerous, but he's a warm-up," Saitama finished, and the flicker of hope guttered, and then, because a bored man will take what he can get, he cracked his knuckles anyway. "Okay, fine, whatever. He's threatening the Curry People's town, and he's got a big mouth, and I've been sitting on a couch getting told I'm consequential for 4 hours. He set the fork down on the armrest, very carefully, the way a man sets down something he intends to come back to. "I'm gonna go tell him to knock it off." He glanced back at Surzex. "And then you're gonna tell me about the strong one, the real one. Deal?" Surzex Lucifer, one of the 4 great Satans, who had come to Kuoh, prepared to spend the full weight of his power to stop Kokabiel and prevent a war, lowered his crimson-wreathed hand and stepped aside, and did the only sensible thing left to do. "Deal," he said, and Saitama walked out the schoolhouse door toward the screaming blood-red sky, in gym shorts and a too small t-shirt, to have a word with a fallen angel who was about to become one more thing that fell down in a single hit. Kokabiel saw the man walking out onto the school grounds and, for one glorious moment, thought he'd been given a hostage. "What's this?" The rogue fallen angel's laughter rolled down again, delighted. "A human? You send a human out to meet me? Is this Surzex's idea of a joke? Or did the little Grimory brat run out of devils and start throwing her pets at me?" He drifted lower, 10 black wings beating slow, the 4 Excalibur fragments orbiting him like satellites of corrupted light. The tree-sized spears of light still hung in the air around him, ready. "Little man, little bald man in your little shorts. Do you have any idea what I am? I am one of the 10-winged. I fought in the Great War. I have killed more devils than your entire species has produced in a century. And you walked out here to, what? Beg? Bargain?" He grinned, all teeth. "Die first then. I'll start the massacre with you." Saitama stopped in the middle of the ruined field, hands in the pockets of his borrowed shorts, and looked up at the enormous winged being blotting out the blood-red sky. "You talk a lot," he observed. Kokabiel's grin flickered. I'm gonna be honest with you, Saitama went on, in the same flat, tired voice he'd used on everyone all night. Everybody keeps telling me you're a big deal. 10 wings, killed a bunch of people, gonna restart some war. And I got a little excited, 'cause I've been hoping, genuinely hoping, that somewhere in this whole world of devils and gods and dragons, there'd be one guy who could actually give me a fight. He sighed, and the sigh carried across the silent field. But I'm looking at you now, and I already know you're gonna do a big speech and throw your big light spears and change the sky some more. And then I'm gonna hit you once, and you're gonna fall down, and I'm gonna feel absolutely nothing. Same as always. He rolled his shoulders. So can we just skip to the part where you attack me? I got told the actual strong one is coming after, and I'd rather not waste the whole night on the opening act. The clubroom, watching through the tall windows, held its breath. Rias had her hand pressed to the glass. Issei was whispering he did not just say that to Kokabiel over and over. Even the two Satans watched with total attention, because a Satan telling Kokabiel to skip his speech would have been suicidal arrogance. A bald man in gym shorts doing it was something none of them had a word for. Kokabiel's face contorted with rage. Opening act, the blood-red sky boiled. Every tree-sized light spear ignited at once, and the fallen angel flung the entire barrage down at the insolent human. A dozen spears of concentrated holy destruction, each one enough to level a city block, all of them converging on the single small figure standing in the field with his hands in his pockets. The light of them turned night into blistering white noon. The peerage flinched back from the windows. The ground where Saitama stood ceased, for a moment, to be visible at all beneath the detonation of holy light. A blast that cratered the entire schoolyard, threw up a mushroom of pulverized earth, and rolled a shockwave outward that shattered every window in the old schoolhouse and knocked half the peerage off their feet. When the light faded, there was a smoking crater 100 meters wide where the field had been, and in the center of it, entirely unharmed, stood Saitama, hands still in his pockets, looking mildly put out that his borrowed t-shirt now had a little scorch on the hem. "Aw," he said, "Rias is gonna be mad about the windows." Kokabiel stared. The 4 Excalibur fragments wobbled in their orbit as his concentration faltered. "Impossible," the fallen angel breathed. That would kill a high-class devil. That would kill a Satan. You should be..." "Atoms, yeah, I know. Saitama waved a hand, scattering the last drifting motes of holy light like gnats. "Everybody keeps telling me what I should be. Devil-killing swords, God-killing light. Doesn't matter. It all just kinda stops when it gets to me. I don't really get why either, if that helps." He looked up at Kokabiel with something almost like sympathy. "Look, man, I get it. You built your whole thing around being scary. 10 wings, big war, everybody trembles. And then some bald guy walks up and eats your best shot and it doesn't do anything, and now you're standing there, realizing none of it mattered." He nodded slowly. "That's rough. I actually feel for you. That's basically my whole life, except from the other side." Kokabiel roared and charged, abandoning ranged attacks, coming down on the human like a meteor with a spear of light gripped in each fist, the full physical might of a 10-winged fallen angel warlord who had personally killed thousands, driving both blades down at Saitama's skull with the intent to end him. Saitama caught both spears, one in each hand, on the points. He held them, and Kokabiel, all his monstrous strength, all his ancient power, all 10 wings straining, could not push them a single millimeter further. The fallen angel hung there in the air, arms locked, face twisting from rage to confusion to, at last, the beginning of the thing Saitama had watched dawn on 100 faces, the understanding that he had made a catastrophic mistake. "You want to know the worst part?" Saitama asked him, conversational, holding 2 city block-killing light spears still with his bare hands, while a warlord strained against him with everything he had. "The worst part is you were strong. For real. Sirzek's over there, the Satan, he said you were a genuine threat to everyone in that building. You could have killed all of them. The devil kids, the church girls, all of them. You're probably one of the strongest things in this whole world." He tightened his grip, and both Excalibur-forged light spears crumbled, disintegrating into harmless sparks in his fists. "And it still doesn't matter. That's the thing nobody understands until they're standing where you are right now. It was never about how strong the other guy was. It was always about how strong I am. And I'm... The boredom came back into his voice, gray and final. I'm too strong. It ruins everything. It ruins it for me, and it ruins it for you. 'Cause you were probably really looking forward to your war. What are you? Kokabiel shrieked, thrashing backward, 10 wings beating in a frenzy to put distance between himself and the impossible human. You're not a devil. You're not an angel. You're not a Longinus. You're not a god. You're not a dragon. There is nothing in creation that... I'm just a guy, Saitama said, who's here for a hobby. And he jumped. He didn't fly. He had no wings, no magic, no aura. He simply jumped, off the floor of the crater, and the ground he pushed off of exploded downward from the force of it, and he crossed the 100 meters of air between himself and the hovering fallen angel in a fraction of a second, cape snapping behind him, one fist drawn back. Kokabiel had time, barely, to raise both arms and summon every ounce of defensive power a 10-winged warlord possessed. A shield of concentrated holy light, layered a dozen deep, the kind of barrier that could turn aside a Satan's strongest attack. Saitama punched through all of it without slowing down. He was, to his enormous credit, not even trying to be dramatic about it. He didn't use his special moves. He didn't name the attack. He'd learned a long time ago that anything more than a normal punch was overkill for a thing that would fall to a normal punch. And Kokabiel was, in the end, a thing that would fall to a normal punch. The fist connected with the fallen angel's crossed arms, blew through the layered holy shield like it was fog, and the shockwave alone, not the punch, the wake of the punch, the displaced air, carried Kokabiel backward and up, tearing through his own blood-red sky, unraveling it as he went, the false crimson peeling away to reveal the ordinary night stars beneath. The peerage lost sight of him somewhere past the clouds. There was a long, long pause. Then, very far up, a single black feather drifted down out of the sky, followed by a distant, diminishing sound that might have been a scream, receding toward the horizon, as one of the strongest fallen angels who had ever lived tumbled through the upper atmosphere in a helpless ballistic arc, alive. Saitama had, at the last instant, out of a decency that even in that moment governed his fist, pulled the blow to not quite lethal, but comprehensively, permanently, and educationally defeated. The 4 Excalibur fragments, their wielder gone, tumbled from the sky and thudded into the ruined earth, inert. The blood-red sky was gone. The ritual array, its holy sword power scattered, sputtered and died. The war Kokabiel had spent centuries planning to reignite ended, in total, in slightly under 1 second, at the hands of a man in borrowed gym shorts, who was already turning around and walking back toward the schoolhouse, rubbing the scorch mark on his hem and looking, if anything, gloomier than before. Inside, nobody spoke. 2 Satans stood at the shattered windows and stared at the crater and the drifting feather and the man ambling back across the wreckage with his hands in his pockets. Sirzek's Lucifer had come to Kuoh to spend everything he had to stop Kokabiel. He had watched the entire threat neutralized in a single unhurried punch, by someone who had then immediately gone back to being sad about it. Ajuka, Sirzek said quietly. I saw it, Ajuka said. His voice was very soft. I saw it, and I still don't have a framework for it. He punched a hole in a 10-winged fallen angel's absolute defense with a jab he didn't even care about, and he pulled it. At the end, he chose not to kill. The green-haired Satan's eyes were wide. Sirzek, do you understand what that means? The power is one thing. The power is beyond anything. We knew that. But the restraint, a being with that much power, who is that bored, that starved for meaning, and who still, in the moment of victory, holds back to spare a life he had every reason to take. He turned to his fellow Satan. We've been treating him as an unmeasurable threat. We had it exactly backwards. An unmeasurable power with no restraint would be the end of the world. An unmeasurable power with that restraint is the safest thing that has ever existed. He's not a bomb, Sirzek. He's the opposite of a bomb. He's a man who could end everything, and chooses, over and over, tonight, not to. Saitama reached the schoolhouse door and leaned in through the empty window frame. Okay, he's handled, he announced to the room full of stunned faces. I didn't kill him. I just kinda launched him. He'll land somewhere. Probably fine, mostly. He looked at Rias. Sorry about the windows. And the field. And, the crater. I'll help fix it if you got tools. Then he turned to Sirzex, and the tired eyes came alive again. Just faintly. Just at the edges. With the one thing in all of creation that could still stir him. Okay, Saitama said. I did the opening act. Your turn. You said someone strong was coming. The actual strong one. He stepped through the window into the room. Tell me about the dragon. And high above, at the edge of the dimensional gap, having watched the entire thing with infinite patience, and something that in a lesser being might have been called anticipation, the Ouroboros began, at last, to descend. Sirzex never got to tell him about the dragon. The dragon told him about itself. The air in the center of the ruined schoolyard, where Kokabiel's crater still smoked, where the 4 inert Excaliburs lay half-buried in churned earth, began, very quietly, to thin. Not tear. The way the dimensional gap had torn when Saitama fell through. Thin. The way ice thins from below before it gives. The fabric of the world going translucent over a spot the size of a person, revealing behind it that gray-black nowhere where colors without names slid over each other. Every supernatural being present felt it at once, and every one of them reacted the same way. They went absolutely, gravely still, the way animals go still when a predator infinitely beyond them enters the clearing. Down, Sirzex breathed. Everyone. Now, do not move, do not speak. Brother, what? Rias. He had never spoken to her like that. It stopped her cold. That is Ophis, the Ouroboros, the infinity dragon, one of the 2 strongest existences in all of creation. His voice had gone hollow. There is nothing, that any of us can do if it decides to act. Not me. Not Ajuka. Not both of us together with every Satan and every god. Kneel, be silent, and pray it's only curious. From the thinning patch in the world, a figure stepped through. It was small. That was the first cruelty of it. That a being of infinite power wore the shape of a slender, black-haired child in a Gothic dress, barefoot on the ruined earth, with eyes like 2 holes punched through into that same gray nowhere. It looked around the schoolyard with an expression of perfect flatness, registering the kneeling Satans, the flattened peerage, the smoking crater, the exorcists frozen mid-motion, and dismissed all of it, all of them, the entire assembled might of the supernatural world, in less than a second, as beneath its notice. Then it looked at Saitama, who was standing in the middle of the field with his hands in his pockets, and it did not dismiss him. You, said Ophis. Its voice was small and toneless, and utterly without echo, a voice from a place where sound had never been invented. You came through the gap, from outside. Nothing comes through the gap from outside. Great Red cannot. I cannot. The child shape tilted its head a precise, inhuman degree. How? Saitama looked at the small, barefoot child that 2 Satans were kneeling in terror before, and did the thing he always did, the thing that had baffled gods and monsters and scientists all night, which was to answer honestly. I fell, he said. There was a hole. I was going to the store. He paused. You're the strong one? The one everybody's scared of? The kneeling devil's heart stopped. I am Ophis, said the infinity dragon, as though that were an answer, which, to everything else in creation, it was. Okay. Saitama took his hands out of his pockets, and the peerage watched, with dawning, incredulous, terrified understanding, the tired boredom fall away from him completely. Watched him stand up straighter than he had all night. Watched the flicker of hope that had guttered 100 times finally catch and hold, and become something bright and desperate, and almost unbearably vulnerable on the face of a man who had given up on ever feeling it again. Okay, good. Sirzex said, the strongest thing in the world was coming, and I gotta be honest with you. I've been let down all night. The monster fell in one punch. The fallen angel, with the 10 wings, fell in one punch. Everybody keeps being a big deal, and then falling down. He took a breath. But you, 2 Satans are on their knees. The smart one over there looks like he's gonna throw up. Nobody's telling me you're a warm-up. His fists came up, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Saitama felt his own heart beat faster. So please, 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 please. Be a real fight. I'm begging you. Just be one thing in this whole world that doesn't fall down when I hit it. Ophis regarded him with its bottomless eyes. You wish to fight me, it said, not a question. A thing it was noting, the way it noted everything, flatly and forever. More than I've wanted anything in years, Saitama said, and meant it with his whole chest. And Ophis, the infinity dragon, the Ouroboros, a being for whom the entire scheming history of the Chaos Brigade was a single move in a game to reclaim its silent home, considered the small strange thing in the yellow and blue that had punched through a membrane nothing could punch through, and understood it in the only terms it understood anything. No, said Ophis. The hope on Saitama's face cracked. I do not fight for sport, the infinity dragon continued in its small, toneless voice. I do not fight for anger. I have wanted one thing, always, silence. The return of my home. Great Red occupies the dimensional gap that is mine. I wish it gone, so that I may return to the stillness. Every war I make, every alliance, serves this. Its holes into nowhere eyes stayed fixed on him. You came through the gap from outside. You are stronger than the framework of this world can hold. I felt the instrument of the Green One break from across realities. I felt the 10-winged thing you unmade a moment ago. I feel that I cannot feel your ending, the way the others cannot. You may be strong enough to move Great Red. You may be strong enough to remove Great Red. A pause, infinite and small. I will not fight you. I will offer you a piece of infinity, and a place beside me. And in exchange, when the time comes, you will do the one thing I have never been able to do. You will remove the dragon of dragons, and give me back my silence. The offer hung in the ruined air. The Satans knelt frozen. The peerage did not breathe. It was, they all understood dimly, the single most dangerous moment of the entire night. More dangerous than Kokabiel. More dangerous than anything, because the infinity dragon was offering the unmeasurable man a purpose, a fight worthy of him, and a place at the side of the one being in creation who could match his scale. If Saitama said yes, the Chaos Brigade would gain a member against whom no faction, no alliance, no god could stand, and the world as they knew it would simply end. Saitama listened to the whole thing. He rubbed the back of his bald head, and then he asked the only question that had ever mattered to him. So this Great Red guy, he said, the one you want me to fight, he's strong? He is the strongest existence in the world, Ophis said, the dragon of dragons. The true red dragon god emperor. He swims in the gap and cannot be moved. Stronger than you? We have never resolved it, Ophis admitted, and it was the closest thing to uncertainty the eternal being had ever expressed. He displaced me. I could not displace him. Perhaps he is stronger, perhaps only more stubborn. Saitama's eyes lit up. Would fighting him be a good fight? He pressed, stepping closer. And the Satans flinched at a man walking toward the Ouroboros. Like, a real one? Where I actually have to try? Where he doesn't just fall down? He would not fall down, Ophis said, with total certainty. Nothing I know of could make Great Red fall down. And Saitama, the strongest being anyone present had ever encountered, a man who had turned down the throne of the underworld without a thought, who could not be recruited or controlled or threatened by any power in creation, smiled. A real smile. The first genuine, unguarded, delighted smile he'd shown all night, breaking across the bored face like sun through a permanent overcast. Okay, he said. Yeah, I'll fight Great Red. He punched his palm, and the sound of it cracked across the schoolyard. Not for you. Not for your silence thing. No offense. I don't really care about that. And I'm not joining your evil dragon club or whatever the offer was. He shook his head. But if there's a guy out there who's actually the strongest, who actually won't fall down when I hit him, man, I'd walk to him. I've been looking for that my whole life. You don't gotta give me a piece of infinity or a place at your side, or any of that. You just gotta point me at him. His grin widened. Where is he? Ophis went still. It had offered a piece of its own infinity, a thing it had never offered anyone, a thing that had bound the strongest beings of the age into its brigade. And the small, strange man had waved it away as whatever. It had offered purpose, and a place, and the fight of a lifetime, wrapped in a scheme millennia in the making, and the man had reached past all of it, and taken only the fight, and refused the leash entirely, and asked for directions. The Infinity Dragon had never, in the whole of its endless existence, encountered a thing it could not bind with an offer, because it had never encountered a thing that wanted nothing it did not already have. "You would fight Great Red," Ophis said slowly, "but you will not serve me." "I don't serve anybody," Saitama said, friendly about it. "I just want to fight the strong guy. That's not an evil team thing, that's a me thing. But hey," he shrugged, "if you're going wherever he is anyway, I'll walk with you. No hard feelings about the piece of infinity thing. I'm sure it's real nice, just not what I'm here for." And for the first time in the memory of any being present, the Ouroboros dragon, the Infinity Dragon, one of the two strongest existences in all of creation, was visibly, genuinely, completely at a loss. Its bottomless eyes searched the bored, hopeful, unbindable man in front of it, and found nothing to offer, nothing to threaten, nothing to bargain with, no handle anywhere on a being who already had everything infinity could give, and wanted only the one thing infinity couldn't, to lose. "I do not understand you," Ophis said finally, and it was, from that being, an admission of earthquake proportions. "Yeah," Saitama said, not unkindly. "I get that a lot." Ophis stayed for a long time after that, by its own standards, nearly a full minute, an eternity for a being that measured attention in the blinking of universes. It did not attack. It did not repeat its offer. It stood barefoot in the smoking crater and studied Saitama with those holes into nowhere eyes, turning him over the way Ajuka had tried to and failed, the way every being that night had tried and failed. And where all of them had been baffled by his power, Ophis was baffled by something the others hadn't had the scale to even perceive, that here, at last, was a thing infinity could not model. A being that wanted nothing, a being with no lever. The Infinity Dragon had spent eons certain it understood the fundamental architecture of all wanting, that everything, gods and dragons and satans alike, wanted more, and could therefore be moved by the promise of more. And this small, bald thing had all the more there was, and had discovered that more was empty, and now wanted only the single experience that being the strongest had stolen from him forever. It was, to Ophis, a genuinely new thing in a very old universe, and the Ouroboros, whatever else it was, had never been able to look away from a new thing. "I will consider," Ophis said at last, which meant nothing and everything. "You wish to fight Great Red. Great Red does not leave the gap. You came from the gap. A pause, small and infinite. Perhaps the way home you seek, and the fight you seek, are the same road." Its head tilted. "Perhaps I will show you both, when I have considered." "That'd be great, honestly," Saitama said. "Whichever, fight, home, both. I'm flexible." And Ophis, without farewell, the concept of farewell being as foreign to it as boredom was native to Saitama, simply stopped being in the schoolyard. The thin patch in the world resealed. The gray nowhere behind it was gone. The night was, abruptly, only a night, ruined, cratered, littered with inert holy swords and shattered glass, but ordinary. The blood-red sky long since punched away, the ordinary stars back where they belonged. For a moment nobody moved. Then Sir Jex Lucifer let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire encounter, and rose from his knee, and the strongest devil of his generation had to steady himself for a moment against the window frame. "It left," he said, mostly to convince himself. "Ophis came, and made its offer, and was refused, and it simply left, without incident." He looked at Saitama with an expression that had traveled, over the course of one night, from fear to wariness, to something that was almost awe. "Do you have any idea what you just did? The Chaos Brigade, the single greatest threat to the peace of the entire supernatural world, is built on beings who accepted that offer. The strongest rogues of every faction, bound to Ophis by a fragment of infinity, and you turned it down like it was a timeshare pitch." "It didn't have what I wanted," Saitama said simply, picking his way out of the crater. "The offer, I mean. Piece of infinity, place at its side, all that. I got no use for it. I don't want more power. I want less. Well, no. I want a guy who can stand up to the power I got." "That's different," He reached the schoolhouse and leaned in the empty window frame again, and the brief brightness of the encounter was already fading from him, the boredom seeping back in around the edges now that the strong one had come and gone without a fight. It said maybe it'd show me great red. Maybe that's the way home too. So, I guess I wait. He shrugged. I'm good at waiting. Nothing else to do when everything falls in one punch. They rebuilt through the rest of the night, and into the dawn, and it was in that rebuilding that the shape of the new world quietly settled. Azazel returned, took one look at the crater and the inert Excaliburs and the faces of two Satans, and got the whole story out of Rias in about 90 seconds, and then laughed until he had to sit down. Kokabiel, he wheezed. Centuries of planning. The stolen swords, the ritual, the war he was going to restart. One punch. One. And then he turned down Ophis. Do you understand what a gift this is? The unmeasurable neutral party who wants nothing, refuses everyone, and just referees. He wiped his eyes. The peace is safer with him in the world than it has ever been, precisely because nobody can own him. He cancels out every schemer at once. You can't build a superweapon plan around a being who'll just wander off looking for groceries. And that, more than anything, was what the factions took away from the night. The Satans returned to the underworld and told the other two the truth, that a power beyond the framework had entered the world, that it could not be recruited or controlled or threatened, and that this was, against all instinct, good news, because a power that wanted nothing could not be turned into a weapon by anyone, and a power with that much restraint would not become one on its own. Azazel carried the same word to Grigori, and, eventually, a version of it reached Michael and the angels. The church quietly reclassified the anomaly from threat to be purified to do not, under any circumstances, provoke, and Zenobia, who had watched a bald man catch her Excalibur with 2 fingers and then spare a warlord's life, found her faith. Oddly, strengthened rather than shaken, because a being that powerful and that merciful felt to her less like a monster, and more like a rebuke to every being that had ever used power cruelly, including, she thought, some in her own church. Kiba got his reckoning with Valper Galilei 2 nights later, on his own terms, with his peerage at his back, and Saitama pointedly staying home, and he won it himself, the hard way, and it cost him something, and meant something, exactly as the bored man had promised it would. He came home wrung out and grieving, and, for the first time since his second life began, free of the cold thing that had run him. He never told anyone that the most important thing anyone had said to him about revenge had come from a man in gym shorts eating curry, and Saitama stayed in Kuoh. There was, after all, nowhere else to go until Ophis made good on its maybe. Azazel put his Grigori researchers on the dimensional gap problem in earnest, genuinely trying, both because he'd made a deal and because the science of it fascinated him, and made slow, real progress, and told Saitama honestly when he was stuck. Rias, who had stopped thinking of Saitama as a force of nature and started thinking of him as a lonely house guest, let him stay in the club building, and Aisha kept feeding him, and Issei appointed himself Saitama's #1 fan and follower, and was crushed with delight when Saitama, one afternoon, offered, with the air of a man doing a small favor, to teach him how to throw a punch. It's 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run, every day. That's it? That's it. It won't make you strong like me, nothing does. But it'll make you strong like you. That's the part that actually matters, kid. Trust me. He found, slowly, without meaning to, that he minded being in Kuoh less than he'd expected. Not because of the power. The power was the same everywhere. Everything still fell in one punch. But the curry people were kind, and the little nun still got happy when he ate what she cooked, and the sword kid had stopped looking haunted, and the loud teenager thought he hung the moon, and the short glasses lady had started, grudgingly, playing chess with him in the evenings, mostly because it was the one thing in the world he was reliably, hilariously bad at. A being who could delete gods could not, it turned out, see 3 moves ahead to save his life. And Sona Sitri found a strange and genuine peace in beating the strongest thing in creation at chess, 4 games out of 5, every single night. It wasn't a real fight, but it was something. It was almost, on the good evenings, something like a life. And out past the edges of everything, in the gray nowhere between worlds, an eternal serpent turned a fragment of its infinite attention toward a small bald anomaly that wanted nothing, and refused everything, and considered, and did not stop considering, because somewhere in that endless deliberation was a question the infinity dragon had never had to ask before, and could not yet answer. What do you offer a being who already has everything, except the chance to finally lose? And beyond even Ophis, deeper in the gap, in the churning nowhere where the dragon of dragons swam alone and unmoved and unmovable, something ancient and red and impossibly vast felt, for the first time in an age, the faint, distant, patient approach of the one thing in all of creation that had never once, in its whole existence, fallen down in a single punch. Great Red, the strongest being in the world, stirred in its endless sleep, and, very slightly, for reasons it could not have named, it smiled. Saitama sat on the roof of the old schoolhouse that night, in a fresh yellow suit that Grigori's tailors had reproduced for him down to the stitch, and watched the ordinary stars over a town where devils ran the student council, and gods were real, and nothing, so far, had been able to give him a real fight. Someday, he told the sky, unbothered, patient, a hero the whole supernatural world could neither rank nor recruit nor refuse. Great Red, the strongest guy there is. He cracked his knuckles, and for once the boredom had a floor under it, a small bright thing to stand on. That's gonna be a good one. I can feel it. Somewhere below, Asia called up that dinner was ready. "Coming," Saitama said, and climbed down to eat. The strongest man in creation had found, in a world of gods and monsters, exactly two things worth staying for: a promise of a fight that might finally be real, and a warm plate of curry made by someone who was glad he was there. For now, that was enough. The Excaliburs were recovered. The war Kokabiel died 1,000 times over never came, and the three factions signed their fragile peace 3 weeks later, steadier than it had ever been, because a being none of them could own now walked among them, and wanted only to be left alone with his groceries. Ophis considered, and watched, and did not repeat its offer, and did not withdraw it either. And in the deep gap, the dragon of dragons dreamed of a punch it had not yet felt. The strongest hero and the strongest existence had not yet met. But the road between them had opened the night. A bored man fell out of the sky, and roads, once opened, tend to get walked. Somewhere, a serpent is still considering. Somewhere, a red dragon is still smiling. And somewhere in Kuoh, a man is still waiting for the one fight that won't end in a single hit, patient and decent, and closer to it than he has ever been.